What does Iran want? Tensions between the US and Iran have escalated ever since Trump became president, sparking a media frenzy and TikTok videos about World War III. The memes may be new, but the tensions aren't.
Iran.
If you watch the news or listen to the US government's rhetoric, it may seem like the only thing that Iran wants is war. We're going to look at some of the crucial events that have shaped Iran to what it is today, and what the world looks like from Iran's point of view.
We want Iran to simply behave like a normal nation.
When Mike Pompeo comes out and says that Iran needs to act like a normal country, these sorts of things are taken as showing the hypocrisy of the American administration.
This is Narges Bajogli, and she's a professor of Middle East Studies at Johns Hopkins University. As an Iranian researcher, Bajogli has a pretty good understanding of what the Iranian state and ordinary Iranians want, which, to be clear, can be different things. But more importantly, she understands the context around what Iran wants.
The Iranians want to be seen as a country of people that have aspirations. Any other society that's sort of under this much international pressure, economic pressure, military pressure, they sort of want the space to be able to breathe. They're trying to live their lives like folks in other parts of the world. In order to understand why it seems like Iran and the US have been in opposition for so long, one needs to sort of go back in history a little bit. Some of the main events that have shaped Iran's modern politics are the 1953 coup, the revolution of 1979, the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, the downing of the Iran Air passenger plane by US forces over the Persian Gulf. The 1953 coup is very significant. In 1950, Iran's prime minister at the time, Mohammad Mossadegh, was the first third world leader in the world to nationalize his country's natural resources, which in the case of Iran was oil. And at that time, it was really controlled by the British. And he ended up basically kicking out the British. The CIA, with the help of the MI6, ended up conducting the CIA's first coup in 1953 against the Iranian prime minister. The Shah was brought back into power by the United States. It really shifted what a lot of folks in Iran thought as far as who actually ends up holding power in Iran.
Under the Shah, Iran was an authoritarian autocracy which survived because of US backing.
There was this belief that because of the way in which the Shah had aligned himself with the United States, that they really had no chance at determining sovereignty over their own country. So once the revolution happens and it takes this very anti-imperialist stance, American policymakers begin to feel that they lost Iran, that they lost the biggest ally that they had in the Middle East, because it really was this massive revolution from below that ended up completely toppling the existing political and social structure. So from that moment forward, the way in which Iranians had viewed the US is really through the lens of 1953. And the 1979 revolution needs to sort of be seen as a continuation of that national liberation struggle to get away from being under the auspices of the United States.
These two events were a signal that Iranians wouldn't accept their fate being influenced by outside powers, and that they were demanding sovereignty over their own country. The revolution was initially supported by many leftists and liberals, but the power struggle that followed saw the triumph of forces loyal to Ayatollah Khomeini, the supreme leader who was both the religious authority and commander-in-chief, and they set about eliminating their rivals.
A few months after the revolution, in November of 1979, students who had aligned themselves with Ayatollah Khomeini went into the American embassy and took American hostages because they were afraid that the US would stage another coup in Iran or to sort of do away with this new revolutionary government.
The US imposed its first set of sanctions on Iran that November. And then, in 1980, something profound happened to Iran that not just plays a pivotal role in how the country views itself, but also how politics has played out in the region till today: the Iran-Iraq War.
It was the longest conventional war of the 20th century, and it ended up significantly realigning the geopolitics of the region. The Iran-Iraq War was their first really foray into understanding how the United States fights proxy wars. Saddam Hussein's Iraq was heavily supplied by the United States as well as other Western powers.
It's important to mention another player in the war, Saudi Arabia. You see, the Islamic Revolution of '79 established a theocracy in Iran that directly challenged Saudi Arabia's influence in the region. Unsurprisingly, the Saudis weren't too happy about that, so they bankrolled Iraq in the 8-year-long war.
The aftermath of the Iran-Iraq War left a very, very large veteran population. Many of those veterans end up sort of coming into positions of political power.
And since then, the relationship between the US and Iran has been complicated. In 1988, the US military shot down an Iranian commercial jet, killing all 290 people on board, including 66 children. And we're still feeling the impact of this 2002 speech by George W. Bush.
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil.
That pushed Iran deeper into not only feeling isolated, but also betrayed, since it had actually cooperated with the US during the invasion of Afghanistan after 9/11. And in 2005, the election of hardline nationalist and veteran of the Iran-Iraq War, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, didn't help either. During his presidency, he pursued a more confrontational path on Iran developing nuclear energy, leading the US to hit Iran with more sanctions.
What ends up happening is that it hurts the general population in very significant numbers, but it does not really do anything to the political elite of the country. There's a lot of economic corruption and mismanagement from within the system itself.
Everything that Iran has gone through in the past, from coup to the sanctions to the massive public protests against the Iranian state, has directly influenced the country's strategy on how it behaves in the region. One of the biggest breakthroughs by the Obama presidency was this.
The United States, together with our international partners, has achieved something that decades of animosity has not. A comprehensive long-term deal with Iran that will prevent it from obtaining a nuclear weapon.
And in Iran, it was seen as a way out of isolation.
I mean, the nuclear energy program among the general population is also an extremely popular program. Many Iranians wanted an agreement to come about between Iran and the Europeans and the Americans in order to begin to ease relationships. Iran has allowed inspectors to come in and inspect all of its different nuclear facilities. It has insisted that its nuclear facilities are for peaceful purposes and not for building a bomb, and that has been sort of approved over and over again by international watchdogs.
But then on May 8th, 2018, despite the fact that Iran had been found to be completely compliant with the deal's requirements,
I am announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
Once Trump ends up pulling out of the deal, the hardliners in the country are really vindicated and say, well, aha, we told you so, that you can't trust the United States. And it's not going to want Iran to actually be a part of the international community. And this is not on us, this is on them.
Iran's experience with American interventionism and sanctions, as well as being locked in a fierce, hostile rivalry with Saudi Arabia and Israel over influence in the region, means it partakes in proxy wars. It supports and creates alliances with state and non-state actors, either through diplomacy, funding, or weapons. The objective of this strategy is for Iran to establish some economic alliances and to project power across the region by supporting local militias.
Iran sees its relationship with Hezbollah as a legitimate one that was effectively able to fight against Israeli occupation in the country. Hezbollah is labeled as a terrorist organization from the United States' perspective, from within Lebanese society, and then especially from within the perspective of the Islamic Republic. These organizations, and Hezbollah in particular, is seen as a resistance organization against an occupying force. The forces that Iran has supported in in Iraq, for example, include what's known in English as the Popular Mobilization Units, which is sort of an umbrella for many of the different militant groups in Iraq. You know, when people ask why does Iran support these groups around the region, from the perspective of the Iranian government, it's their insurance policy to ensure that it would be too costly for the U.S. to invade Iran. It's the way that they can ensure that they are not next on the list of being attacked.
Other than supporting Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran also supports the Houthi rebellion against the Saudi-backed internationally recognized government in Yemen, a country that has been ravaged by war and famine. And in Syria, Iran props up President Assad.
You have to understand that during the Iran-Iraq war, every single Arab country in the region, except for Syria, backed Iraq. Another reason is that the ways in which they see what's happening in the region is that they believe that Israel especially, but the United States as well, they want these areas to become failed states, because then they would not pose as direct of a challenge to Israel. They sort of saw that if Syria would not be in the control of Assad anymore or turn into sort of a failed state, it would make Iran even lonelier in the region.
So what does this all mean?
What the Islamic Republic wants as far as its relations with other countries in the Middle East, as well as the international community as a whole, differs from time to time depending on what's going on geopolitically and sort of in international politics. And in the aftermath, once the JCPOA began to fall apart, their line consistently has been that they are willing to negotiate with the international community, but as long as it is done so in a respectful manner.
But perhaps the answer to what Iran wants can be found when figuring out what Iran definitely doesn't want.
What Iran does not want is it does not want to be seen as a country that will capitulate to the demands of the United States especially and Israel in the region. And so what it is looking for is to be treated with respect as an equal partner in the Middle East as a whole, and not to be sort of made to feel that it has to subjugate to the wishes of what the United States and Israel are looking for as far as the balance of power in the Middle East is concerned.